From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello, welcome to From Canada's Citizens Forum. It is Saturday, April the 26th, 2025. It's myself, Jack Etkin, and co-host Norm Ryder. This is news and current affairs from a Canadian perspective with, from my point of view, an underlying theme that democracy and a free press are important, and we don't have much of either in Canada. So I want to start off saying something about the election and democracy. And I think one of the big problems with our federal election right now is that there is so little democracy in Canada. From my point of view, I don't think it really matters who we vote for. The country is run by big business and the 0.01%, and it's run for big business and the 0.01%. That's why our healthcare system doesn't work, and that's why we have this housing disaster and nightmare, and why the cost of living keeps going up and it's such a big problem, and why you have to wait 15 hours in an emergency room to see a doctor. It's because we're irrelevant. And that's the problem. So how can we fix it up? Well, I really think there are solutions here. And I think one of the biggest solutions is for people to get organized and begin to join your favorite political party, provincial and federal, and begin to democratize the party, make the party democratic so that the members, which is you and everybody else, has some control over the party. Because right now, the way I see it, our political parties are run by small elites at the top, and they don't work for us. And I actually have what I think is a bit of proof about that. I got involved with the BC NDP a few years ago, and I stayed in the party for 2 years and then I left. But I really got involved as much as I could in those 2 years. And the BC NDP, they are the government of British Columbia, right? So this is not a nickel-dime gang. These people are the government of British Columbia. And there was no democracy in that party that I could ever see. The party is run by a small gang at the top. They have total control. The members have, I would say, zero control. And they don't work for the members, and they don't work for the public. From what I can see, they work for big business and the 0.01%. And that's the leadership of the BC NDP, in my opinion. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong. But from what I saw in there, I mean, there really has to be an investigation of how our political parties are run. Because if they are not democratic, and I would say they are definitely not democratic, then what the hell is going on? And there's nowhere to complain to. Like I tried to bring forward a complaint about the way the NDP ran the election of the executive of the BC NDP, the people who actually run the party, because I've never seen anything like that election. It is unbelievable. It's like they tell us life must be like in North Korea. I mean, that's what the election for the leadership of the BC NDP, which is our provincial government, that's what the election of them is like. Completely undemocratic. And yet there's nowhere to go except BC Supreme Court. That's the only place you can go. And I, as an average citizen, I even spent maybe $1,500 on lawyers, and I didn't take one step towards getting a complaint in with the BC Supreme Court. I just couldn't do it. But it's a mess. And I think all the big political parties are run in the same way. And if that's true, then what the hell is going on in Canada? Because we are irrelevant. We are governed by a political elite, and they work for big business and the 0.01% who are at the top, who also own the media, right? So, and we're down here somewhere. That's my rant, Norm. You're muted or something.
Okay. I'm going to switch things around a little bit. What I was going to talk second, I'll talk first. And that is an example of locally and actually nationally, in this election, the lack of democracy in one of the parties. I went to an all candidates meeting on Wednesday night, or more correctly, a 3/4 candidate meeting on Wednesday night. One of them didn't show up. And when I checked in, I found out she hadn't shown up to any of the public all candidates meetings. And it's not just her, it was all the candidates of the Conservative Party are not showing up at the all candidates meetings. Now, this is an instruction from on high, and I would suspect from Polyva, that they are not to attend all candidates meetings, which I find very disconcerting, because how else are we supposed to know what that individual candidate thinks? The whole focus has shifted to vote for what I call the cult of the leader, to vote for one of the basically two main parties. And I'm really concerned with the Conservative Party, because if they're telling their candidates what to do and the candidates are obeying them, maybe they have to if they want the nomination, but that's beside the point. If they're not willing to stand up and say, no, the people deserve to know what I think, they're not taking part in the democracy. All they're doing is going to trumpet back whatever the leader of the party is telling them to tell the people. And as you say, the people will be totally irrelevant if they get in. If those ones are there, will be totally irrelevant. Will be very much in the control of a dictatorship if that's the attitude of the party, that is an acceptable thing to do.
I've got two questions. One, why is there an official reason that the party has about why they won't attend because I've heard that too.
Yeah, I haven't seen what I could call an official reason, other than it certainly appears they want to control the narrative totally. They will host, if you can find them, what they call town hall meetings. Now, if you've gone to a town hall meeting, the, shall we say, host totally controls the agenda. If you're asking questions they don't want, it gets turfed aside. Whereas these all candidates are run by a third party, and they're asked a question and they're expected to answer the question they are asked, as all the other members are, or all the other candidates are asked the same question and expected to answer. You can judge them based on the relevancy of their answer, and many of them don't answer it at all, but it's beside the point. And do you agree with whatever answer they gave?
The other thing you said was it's like they're being told what to do, right, as candidates by Mr. Poilievre and the people who run the party. But that's completely true. And it's another big problem that's never talked about, is that the party leaders completely control all the people we elect. And the prime minister is even worse in terms of power and control.
Well, he is. I think in this case, actually, Carney hasn't at least told his people not to talk to the public. Somewhat better, I guess you might say. I will bring up one other thing that came up at the all candidates meeting. And the Liberal candidate was talking about a vote for him as a vote for Mark Carney, and that's good, rah, rah. Okay, that's his view. But Elizabeth May pointed out, and she's quite right, that none of us are going to vote for Mark Carney or Poilievre. if you're talking about voting for a leader, you're of course voting for her, but that wasn't really the point. She was very much making the point that we should start looking at how our parliamentary system runs. And it does not run the same way as it does in the States, where you get a vote for the leader separate from your local representative.
Yeah,
return to that.
Yeah, that's another. And unfortunately, the people we elect are supposed to be working, representing us, but they can't, because the party leader, and especially if that person is the premier or the prime minister, but the leader of any party has virtually total control over the party members, because they can kick the member out of the caucus just single-handedly. If you go up against the leader, they can kick you out of the caucus, and you then become an sort of independent and lose the next election. And also, the party leader has the right to sign the papers for any candidate who's going to run for that party. That means if the leader doesn't want to sign your papers, you can't run. It's total control. And that is so detrimental to our democracy. And it's never talked about, of course, because the media, who also works for those same corporations who control our politicians, they don't want us knowing what's going on. So they just never tell us. They keep telling us, Canada is this great democracy. Yeah. It's never allowed to be questioned. It can never be questioned. But believe me, I got interested in the subject of democracy, and I looked into it. Canada, just by the rules and regulations of how we operate, is not a great democracy. The people who kind of comment on this issue call us an elected dictatorship, which is much closer to the truth, I think.
Yeah, I wish I could disagree with you, Jack.
Yeah. It's and that issue isn't even getting a comment anywhere about democracy. But again, the solution, one solution, I think, is join your favorite political party, which I did with the NDP. But unfortunately, you're there by yourself, and there's this huge power structure. So it has to be an organized attempt, and not to push the ideas that you like. You can push those, that's fine. But what you really want to push is to democratize the party, so that the members, including you, really have the say in what the party's doing.
Well, actually, Jeff, that's where I think you and I see it a little different than there. That I don't think it's possible to fix the system. I totally agree. The system has to be fixed exactly how you say. But the power elite is entrenched so deeply, I don't think it's possible to change them, just sort of destroy the whole system and build it again.
Yeah, but it would be a great fight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree.
We'd learn a lot. We'd learn a lot from the fight, because we, the people, have to learn how to get organized. We have no organization. We have no leadership. We have no political power. Yada, yada. Anyways, short snappers. Noise. The first one is noise. I work in a little bit in a small shop in part of Victoria, and it happens to be fairly near a corner. And there's a walk, don't walk sign thing at the corner. I've been there for 20 years, right? And suddenly, a couple of weeks ago, it changed. And suddenly this walk, don't walk beep is, if you're walking by it, it's ridiculously loud. And we can now hear it in the shop as it goes on and on and on. And I went to a restaurant that's even closer to it's right on the corner. And sitting in the restaurant, you now hear beep, 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 and then it stops, and then beep, 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 beep. And I thought, these people who are doing this are trying to drive us crazy, because there's no need for it. For 20 years, it was fine. And, noise is a major pollutant, and we shouldn't ignore it. They want us to ignore it, obviously, because there's no, but it's an important issue, and people need peace and quiet. We need peace and quiet. Silence is golden, as the old saying goes. And for them, over and over and over again, in so many different ways, to just lay it on us is something that it would be nice if we could change.
Well, my comment on that, Jack, is that they keep raising the volume, they keep raising the whole idea of safety, because once people get used to one level of, we'll call it safety, they start to ignore it. And so they move it up the scale a little further to the point where it becomes, as you're feeling now, totally unworkable. That somewhere along the line, they've got the light flashing of whether it's walk, don't walk. And we're just going to have to leave it up to your responsibility to figure out whether you should walk out in the middle of the traffic when it says don't walk. That somewhere along the line, personal responsibility for safety should become a lot more important. And that's going away. We can't legislate safety.
Yeah. Moving away from noise, which is a very important issue. Tariffs, which have completely taken over our election, and Trump. And I'd just like to say a few words about tariffs. First of all, this I think is very important, but it's been completely ignored. Although if you Google the idea, you'll see some stories about it. So the story is that President Trump in the United States does not have the power to impose tariffs. That power resides with the Congress, which is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. They have the power to impose tariffs if they want to. And the fact that they're not doing it, and there's not even a discussion about why they're not doing it, suggests to me that all the craziness that Trump is imposing basically on the whole world is not just an out-of-control president, but this is the deep state in action. The media not talking about it, the Congress not acting, and allowing President Trump, and I'm not opposed to tariffs. I think tariffs can be good. I wish we had some in Canada, But you can't do what President Trump is doing because it's loony, and you can't run the world in that kind of loony way. So, but as I say, it's the deep state allowing it to happen and not telling us about it.
Well, you're quite right, Jack. Tariffs do have a place to be used, but not the massive tariffs that Trump is putting in. And he's not putting them in as much to protect industry as he claims. He's doing a lot of that to make the rest of the world, do what he has told them to do as a bully. And his bouncing it back and forth, it's all to create even more and more stress. Mind you, I think there's another little underlying thing that he sees being president as just another business. And he may not personally be making money on the stock market because of the way he's whipsawing it from massive ups to massive downs. But if he tells his friends, I'm going to do whatever, and it's going to affect the stock market one way or the other, they know whether to buy futures on a long or a short for the next couple of days. They make good money, then he moves it the other way. So it's all, I think, frankly, part of a game to manipulate the money out of the working people. That he's very much so. The U.S. pension funds are really suffering a major hit. Well, the people that are hurt by the pension funds going down are the working people that have worked all their life to hopefully have something to retire on, and that's disappearing. And that's, I think, part of his game.
Yeah. The reality of the United States today is that it's a mess. Financially, they have somewhere, I think, in the neighborhood of a $32 trillion national debt. Canada's national debt is about 1.2 trillion. So the United States economy is 10 times as big as ours. That's 12. It should be 12 trillion, but it's over 30 trillion. I just read that the city of Los Angeles is laying off 1,600 people over a short period of time and not filling 1,400 jobs that are vacant because they just don't have any money. And I know I've read in the past that like American cities years ago for example, sold off all their parking meters and that kind of stuff. They needed money. So they sold all their parking meters for the whole city to a private company. And now all that revenue doesn't go to the city anymore. It goes to some corporation. I mean, that's the state that the United States is in. And I think what we're seeing is the end of the United States as the world leader. I think President Trump is, helping to bring it about by basically not only angering the whole world, but isolating the United States from the whole world. And I think the economy is going to collapse and the power structure is going to move somewhere else, to Asia, obviously, or it seems obvious.
Yeah, it's hard to say just what the plan is, but I do think the idea is to remove the U.S. from the world stage. Frankly, I'm not certain it's going to survive as a country. It may split into 3 or more north-south countries.
Yeah. And then it'll be interesting to see what they have planned for Canada, because we're right next to them, right? And I think what they have planned for Canada is this. I think we are going to become a resource superpower, because that's what this election is all about. Somehow the tariffs meant that what we have to do is build more pipelines, do more mining, do more logging, no more time for environmental assessments. Let's just get it done because tariffs from the United States. And I think that's what Canada will become even more of. And the cities are going to collapse, right? There's going to be we can already see it. I think there's going to be much, much more just poverty, misery, and an inability to have certainly the life that people have grown up in. But it's going to be a tough life. That's what but the money will be made on the resources, and that's all that the power structure cares about.
Well, continuing how our cities are going downhill, that the reports I've had, haven't been to the States for quite a while, they're going down much worse than they are here in Canada. And I think everyone recognizes how far things are going down here. So I don't see much hope for the American way of life that you grew up with in the movies that you saw all the time.
Both Canada and the United States had a large middle class. In Canada, going back 70 years, the rich weren't that rich and the poor weren't that poor. Housing was never expensive or difficult to find. But what they have done is completely changed our country around over the past 20 years. Workers can't afford to live in many cases, while investors and the banks and the housing industry has been weaponized against us. They've created a shortage of housing, pushed up rents, pushed up prices, put so many people in debt that people can barely afford to eat. And I'm talking about millions of people. Millions of others are fine so far. But millions have been really screwed over, and their money and their lives have been the money has moved up to the people at the top. And that's the way Canada is run, because we're not a democracy. This is how our rulers now act.
Well, my dad had an expression he said quite often. We would say, when prices were going exactly what you're talking about, what are they going to do when they get all the money? Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, our survival instinct kicks in, and it's got nothing to do with the money in the rich elite's pockets.
Yeah.
It'll change the balance totally. It's just the pain until we get there.
I'm going to talk a little bit about a very controversial topic, measles. And over the past even couple of months now, the media has really been talking a lot about measles. And I think there were a couple of deaths in Texas. Thousands of kids or people have got the measles. And so my question is the media focusing on this because they care about people's health, or is it because they care about corporate profit? What is measles really about? And I want to show something that it's something I saw in a med school textbook, probably close to 50 years ago. A friend was in medical school and called me over one time and said, look at this. And there were charts like this, about 8 of them, about for the various diseases that we vaccinated against. And it showed basically the same as this. It showed the history over time, the official numbers. This is England and Wales. But as far as I know, it was the same in the United States and Canada. Death rate per million, and this is from measles, in children under 15 years of age. So you can see in 1860, it was high. It was 1,000, over 1,000 per million, right? And it was like, and it was more than anything else a public health disease. There was a lot of poverty, and tough times for a lot of people. And that, as a doctor once said, poverty is the mother of measles. And there were a lot of public health improvements over time. Better water, cleaner sanitation, whatever it was, better access to food, central heating. And you can see the deaths from measles down until in 1955, the virus was identified. And sometime after that, the vaccine was introduced. But you can see that measles was almost gone before the vaccine was introduced. And you can also see that for some strange reason, this graph, which, as I said, I first saw in a friend's medical school textbook many years ago, is never mentioned, as if it doesn't exist. So when the media is telling us about measles and showing their great concern for our health, which I don't believe for a second. I don't think the owners of the media care about our health for 1 minute. But that's the question. Are they concerned about our health, or are they concerned about corporate profit? And as far as I'm concerned, they're concerned about corporate profit. This is whooping cough or pertussis, which we also vaccinate against in the DPT vaccine, which is one of the most widely used vaccines. The P is pertussis, whooping cough. And you can see it's the same thing from 1860 down to 1960. Here's when the disease was identified. Here's when the vaccine was introduced. Here's when antibiotics were introduced, and, it peters out. But again, why aren't we ever told this? I'll let it go with that. But all I want, really, I think, is the truth. If vaccines are safe, and I think we give like 60 to kids now. If they're safe and effective, then I am 100% for them. But if this is just more corporate profit with no concern about human health, then, and that's what I think it is, then we have a big problem here in Canada. And because, we're just not being told the truth, if I'm right, but maybe I'm wrong. And really, what are the facts? To me, the facts are this is not safe and effective. I mean, it's just not.
Well, Jack, one thing that jumped out when I was looking at those charts was from about 1915 to 1925 was probably the steepest drop in especially measles. What happened? Why? Then you would think, with the big part of that being the First World War, that a lot of health conditions would have become worse, but for some reason, things improved in that period. I know not that I am obviously, but if I was a researcher looking at the cause and trying to understand it, I'd sure focus on what changed then. Why did it go down?
Yeah. I don't know how tough the times were then, but it could have been that children were dying of something else and not of measles, and that's why the measles thing was going down.
Oh, it certainly could be any number of things, but I know I'd look at that first.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's, if you're interested in democracy and truth, then the measles story is important. And again, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not even saying that I'm right, but the fact that it's, I've seen these numbers exist. Why are they never mentioned? The death rate per million for all the diseases. Anyways, did you have a second comment, Norm?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, I think we should have a referendum question on our ballot. We're not going to have it, obviously, but do we want to be a constitutional monarchy? Do we want King Charles to be our king? And going back to 1901, when Queen Victoria died, at that point, a section of the B&A Act, reinforcing the Constitution Act as well, removed the monarchy from having anything to do with the governing of Canada. But for some reason, that's totally forgotten and ignored. That when Queen Elizabeth died, all the MPs rushed back, and one thing they were unanimously in agreement with was voting to have King Charles as our king. Well, no one ever asked me what I wanted now. Up until a few years ago, I really didn't care. The monarchy doesn't cost us anything. Yes, the Governor General does, but there will be a President of Canada. There'll be something filling that, and it'll cost roughly the same. When the monarchs come here, they're internationally protected people, and we have to pay for their protection. The same thing we have to do when Trump or his kids come to Canada. So there really is no cost to us in the monarchy. But do we want it? That seems to me that's one of the biggest divisions between the rest of Canada and Quebec, that they'd be quite happy if we didn't have the monarchy. And frankly, at this point, I'd be just happy if it was just totally removed. That we should, there should be in every ballot one or two referendum questions. It's simpler to count it then, and we should be ever re-looking and rethinking about what type of Canada do we want to live in. It's not just what the leaders of the political parties want, it's what do the people want for a country.
And for example, do we want a public inquiry with lots of independent media coverage as well as corporate media coverage? Do we want a public inquiry into Canada's tax system? I'd say yes.
That'd certainly be one question that could be put on the ballot. I wouldn't want to see too many questions in any 1 year. It'd be too confusing for people and too many distractions. But Pierre Poilievre is talking about no new taxes, and if there is a new tax, it has to be approved by a referendum. Now, I think that's an unworkable thing, but the idea of having referendums to properly guide Parliament, just where do we want to go? What do we want as a Canada? What is your vision? And we're never asked that question.
Yes, exactly. And those are important questions. And really, they come to the heart of everything. And that's why we're never asked them, because
that's exactly it.
Yeah. Definitely interesting time. So the election is on Monday. I'm predicting a Liberal majority. Et vous?
I'm not so sure it's going to be a majority. It'll still be the Liberals, but they're losing slowly, and it's hard to say when you look at these polls just exactly what's going on, what is the bias there. But the Liberals have, well, they do have a more efficient spread of the votes there. Or put it another way, they lose or they win their seats by a very small margin usually, whereas the Conservatives, especially in Alberta, win by a massive number.
Right. Am I sharing right now?
You were for a moment.
Okay, but it's gone. Okay, I was looking for the numbers again. Oh, yeah, there they are. Yeah, I'll just share them for a second if I can figure out how to do it. Yeah, so again, I mean, I'm predicting, and so these are the percentages. Let's say Liberals 43 and Conservatives 38, 43 to 38. But they are predicting Liberals winning 189 seats, which is a fair, you need 172. 172 is a majority. So they're predicting 189. Who knows how it'll work, but you can see they are not getting 50% of the votes, but they are getting way over 50% of the seats. And, the NDP are getting almost 10% of the votes, which should be like 34 MPs, and they're predicted to get 5. So you can see the system, our voting system does not give us what we vote for, and that's a big problem.
Well, in a sense, it doesn't really matter, Jack, because the MPs, at least if the one that may win this in my area gets in, they're not going to represent the people anyways. They're just going to represent the party leader.
Yeah.
And I think you can say that for a lot of ridings.
Yeah. And again, we've got to figure out a way to make the people we elect work for us. We should control them. Instead, they're controlled by the party leadership, who have total control over them. We should have total control over them. I mean, all the people in the riding, and they should be voting for things that we want. And there should be a constant back and forth with citizens' assemblies and focus groups, where you bring in, let's say a focus group, you bring in 15 people, and you talk about an issue and find out what people want, and they're representative of a broader public, hopefully, if people are selected at random. And then you train people, you teach people how to be part of the governance process. And we should have citizens' assemblies ongoing, provincially and federally, all the time, where there's groups of, let's say, 30 to 40 people on a citizens' assembly, or it could be 100, and they're discussing important issues and bringing a public perspective to it and representing the general public, because that's what a citizens' assembly is supposed to do. And they should be reaching out to the public, the assembly, finding out what we want, reporting it to our member of parliament or our provincial representative. And that's how the country should be run, based on that. But instead, it's the exact opposite. We are all irrelevant, and all the power isn't even with our governments or with the prime minister. It's in corporate Canada. What a dystopian nightmare.
Yeah, well, I definitely think of the premier, prime minister, as nothing more than the PR face for the deep state behind the whole thing. And in that sense, it doesn't really matter. It's the same deep state that you're going to have no matter who the PR at the front. But looking at the citizens' assemblies, I know that the political parties have a little bit of a focus group, but they turn to their members for their opinions. Well, that's, I guess, preaching to the choir is not quite their praise, but it definitely brings up the idea. They're getting the same tired ideas back from their people. That all of these should be done based on a random taking someone's name off of the voters list. And same way with if you're called for jury duty, you have to show up. Same thing for these focus groups. And you're going to get some real crazies show up for this. But you're also going to get some intelligent, comments, and I think it's the only way to find out what do the people really think.
Yeah, and people should get paid for attending them
Oh,
too.
yeah, that's another
Maybe.
discussion.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. At least free daycare for people when they do attend, right?
Well, I was going to go for a lunch.
That too. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Norm, and thank you everybody for watching this segment of From Canada Citizens Forum.